Hi, it's Sam here from the Multipliers Club. Now I know you loved them sound bites from part 1, so here it is, our most anticipated podcast to date. Part 2 of Dr Alka Patel, aka the Hacktivator. Sit down and fasten your seatbelt and hear real talk on subjects I guarantee to spark your interest. Also, please remember to like, comment and share our content so we can keep things moving. And if you want to jump on the show and think you have something to offer, and keep our momentum. If you feel like you could bring something to the table and you want to jump on the show and have a fire conversation, and if you feel like you've got something to offer to keep our momentum moving, then direct message us today. Let's dive right in.
The DNA is the D. So the E, just so that age, hormones, ecosystem, which is going to be gut and fasting.
Yeah.
Anabolism means metabolism. We've kind of done that.
Yeah.
And then the D is the DNA, and we
So
can
we
maybe
can come
back
on
to
to
the
the
genetics.
genetics.
That's kind of cool.
So I think where it left was the nature of it.
Yeah, I just had a follow question whilst we're on that sort of spiritual side. All right, I'll carry on. So whilst we're sort of on that spiritual side of things, I guess with the grounding, and we mentioned meditating, I've got a question. I don't know if you've got too much knowledge on it, but microdosing. So psilocybin, so specifically I microdose mushrooms. I go through phases. So right now I'm not doing it, but then I'll microdose for like a couple of months where I take a small amount of magic mushrooms. So you do, I think it's about it depends on each person. I do about 0.2 grams in the morning, about 4 to 5 times a week. And I do that for 2 months. Then I have a month or two's break. And I see a big difference when I am microdosing, and also not necessarily even once I stop, that continues on. And I've had huge changes from when I first started microdosing to now. Even like I'd never even thought of meditating, and I hadn't even heard of someone else mention it, but I naturally, when I started microdosing, I naturally got drawn into meditating, and it was incredible. Even with things like the cold plunge pool, they have that at my gym. I'd been in it sometimes. I'd literally jump in, jump out. It was freezing cold. Again, when I started microdosing, I just got drawn to it. I went in one day, controlled my breath work, and was in there for 5.5 minutes. And so same thing with nature and walks in nature in the woods and stuff. So by microdosing, it brought me to these things, these natural things that had huge benefits. And I continue to do those now while not microdosing, for example. But yeah, do you have much knowledge on microdosing, the benefits of it, and your opinions and thoughts on it?
Oh, super, super interesting, because it's, talk of the town, isn't it? At the moment, and sometimes not as overtly as we should be talking about it, because the minute you mention magic mushrooms and microdosing, and immediately everyone's going taboo, or, don't want to say that too loud. But again, when it comes to what you've just described there is tapping into a different part of your brain. And that's what you're describing. And I think we kind of get stuck on, this is normal, and this is how we're all meant to operate, operating system 1. And if you operate out of that system, then I'm going to give you another label. And you know what? I think I'll call it ADHD, right? Because you're bouncing around. And so the diagnosis, you were saying earlier about how all these diagnoses are escalating. The diagnosis of ADHD is escalating. But that's because we're going, bouncing about, doing lots of things at once, like, zoning in. That's not normal. But what we're doing is tapping into a different part of your brain, because the world we're living in now is so super busy. And then what you've then done is gone, I want to kind of get into that network of my brain that's untapped and see how that benefits me. And the fact that we now know how to do that in a safe way is super important, because I think, for people listening, there's also a risk of that being unsafe as well, because you've described your own boundaries around it, how you're taking your breaks and you're continuing to notice the difference. The only risk is that people don't do that. And I think you again have to know, what's your source and what's your protocol and what are your boundaries. And back to what we were saying earlier is what's your why and what's your goal. So if you know all of those, absolutely great. And I think it's, this is important. We're learning a lot about mushrooms which are not psilocybin based in terms of their kind of benefits. So things like lion's mane,
I
chaga
take
mushrooms,
that as well.
All of that for performance. And they're like adaptogens. So they help you to allow your stress response to adapt. And again, I think those have got a huge place, and I certainly use them, and I'd recommend them to specific clients as well. So I think you have to choose your thing and know why. But what I'd be super interested for you, Joe, is to put on some of these devices and start tracking whether sitting in a cold plunge pool for 5 minutes is actually beneficial for you or not, because we're back into more is better, and more is not always better.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've found now, only because I've through research in the plunge pool, like 3 minutes or so, 3 to 6 minutes. So I usually just do like 3 minutes in the morning. But yeah, you feel insane when you come out, like so good. But yeah, I'd love to wear these devices when I'm going through a stage of microdosing and see, what would you be looking to track?
Definitely should track your HRV, track your baseline heart rate as well. So track your variability and your baseline. Also things like body temperature are super important. We haven't got into that, but again, that's very much connected to sleep and depth of sleep. Tracking your sleep, and also your kind of general metabolism. So back to how you utilize energy.
Right. Because it overall boosts your mood as well. It just makes you happier. Yeah. It makes you just positive with the world, with day to day, with building relationships, with managing stress. And it also draws you to, opening up a new part of your brain to draw you to things that then you find are good for you. So it kind of has the answers.
And happiness is really important, because, I mean, we're all kind of, it's almost that pursuit of happiness. Like, I've got to be happy, I've got to be happy, I've got to be happy. And there's that in-the-moment happiness, which you've described just now. And then there's the fulfillment part. So have you got both? Because you can chase the happiness and it's making you feel happy. And, happy people are healthier. So, again, look at some of the studies. Happy people are healthier. Healthier people, they make better choices. And people who make better choices, then ultimately, in terms of, again, we're in multipliers, they are wealthier. So there's a connection between all of that, which is super important to think about. But at the same time, don't forget about the fulfillment piece. This has got to carry on and give you that sense of, who was talking about purpose and why, and your drive is being met as well.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. We could probably do a whole podcast on the microdosing.
But let's come back and do that.
Yeah, but so back to the five big...
The big five.
The big five.
Okay, what have we done so far? The big five to get ahead. So we've got age, we've got hormones, which we talked about, and then we've got ecosystem. So the E is ecosystem. So this is about testing. What I mean by ecosystem is testing your gut health.
Right.
And again, if you look at where is all the information, what's emerging now is everything starts in your gut. There's more bacteria and DNA in your gut in relation to the bacteria that you've got in your gut compared to your own human DNA. So they all serve a really, really important role.
On the gut as well, right? So I've listened to a couple of podcasts about gut health, and from my research, apparently, you might be able to help me understand this in more detail, but your gut is directly linked to your brain in terms of how you feel. How true is that? Could you explain that?
Yeah, so we've got this... big nerve called the vagus nerve, and that vagus nerve does connect directly from your gut to your brain. So it's part of what I was talking about earlier, your parasympathetic nervous system, which is why there is also a big connection between mood and food, right? So, what you eat also affects how you feel. And that's because your gut is making a lot of compounds or cofactors that directly relate to your mood. So one of those, for example, is serotonin. Serotonin is in antidepressants, but your gut's making serotonin. So there's this really interesting trial. It was called the SMILES trial. And what they did is they took two groups of people who were feeling down, low mood, depressed. One group had the antidepressants and one group had food. And what they had food-wise was all the good food for your mood. So predominantly plant-based, Mediterranean, lots of vegetables, diverse vegetables, different colours, nuts and seeds. They had a little bit of meat, but that wasn't the kind of primary, but it was still there. And what they found was, pretty flabbergasting. So what they found was that 8% of the people who took the antidepressants after 3 months, they didn't have depression anymore. Right? They were, they recovered and they cured. Compared to over 30% in the food group.
Wow, big difference.
Massive difference.
It's like 4 times the amount.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
just from diet, not antidepressants.
Yeah, because you're making what you need, right? The connection between gut health and brain health and emotional health is that big. And which would you rather? the drugs that give you the side effects potentially, and they're only kind of the sticky plaster over what's really going on, or really getting to the root of it, which is connecting directly to your gut.
So would you say anxiety and depression, is that quite heavily linked to what you're eating and the foods that you put in your body?
Yeah, it is. I think we have to be careful. I think these are, again, labels. There's so many labels. Oh, I'm so depressed. Oh, I'm so stressed. Oh, I'm so anxious. And then there's the clinical level where you really cannot get out of bed and the anxiety grips you so much that your life just becomes really, really narrow. For that, it needs a very kind of therapeutic approach. For what we're kind of describing for most of us, yes, this is real. You've got low mood, you feel really anxious, you worry about what's going on. Zone in on your lifestyle, right? Think about your stress, think about journaling, think about breath.
Because we've seen a massive influx in those cases, I guess, the ones that probably aren't the clinical anxiety and depression, but everyone seems to have some sort of mental health problem now.
And I don't think we should belittle that in any way.
No.
Because it's important that we're all talking about it. But, if I go back to kind of my time as a GP, when I was a very conventional GP, you'd come into my consulting room, I'd obviously assess you, give you a diagnosis of depression, here's your medication, I'll see you in 4 weeks' time. And so that kind of drug approach, it was, a pill for every ill. I honestly felt like the drug pusher. You talk about microdosing, but I was pushing real hard drugs on my patients, even though they were, of the prescribed variety.
For the government. For the big companies, right?
For the big companies.
Exactly, and that's what's going on. And so you stop doing that. It's like, I'm not a drug pusher. This is not why I went to medical school. I went for health, for you to have health. And I, go back to kind of, well, what is health? We haven't even talked about that. We talked about health, this whole thing. We're like, what is health anyway? And I know what it go on.
So, sorry, but just on that, before we change topic, so with the traditional health system, somebody goes to a GP, they might have certain problems with the gut. Is what you're saying, would you say that the health system's broken in terms of traditionally people are given drugs to go collect at a pharmacy, whereas what you're saying is you've changed because you've seen a better way?
Yeah, so I'm going to be super controversial, and I have no problem kind of putting my hand up to this and to say that we don't have a healthcare system.
I agree.
We don't. We've got a sick care system. So when you're sick, like I'll give you something, and you might stay sick, but I'm trying for you not to get sicker, but I'm certainly not getting you back to health. And what we need is a healthcare system, and really what that healthcare system needs to look like is a self-care system. Got to be able to know what to do to take care of yourself, how you move, how you eat, how you sleep, how you connect. That's the fundamental stuff. So is it a broken system? It is.
So we're talking about the prevention and the cure, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And what kind of impact I read something or listened to something about misprescribing drugs, and it may not kill you today or tomorrow, but the impact that, I think I heard a specific example, which is quite a common one, around arthritis, a misdiagnosis of a certain type of arthritis, which then they give you tablets, and after about 7 years or something, it will actually end up leading to arthritis or something. And it was a whole knock-on effect of this type of things. But there's loads of examples, and apparently it's one of the biggest killers in the long term, that just prescribing drugs when really that's not the answer. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, and I think, this is, again, really important to highlight, is that the way the health system is set up is a drugs-first approach. My approach is a lifestyle-first approach. And it doesn't mean that drugs don't have a place. And I don't want anyone listening today to think that if they're taking medication, it's absolutely the wrong thing to do. But it's thinking about, where do you position that? Is that the only thing you're doing? Or is that the primary thing you're doing? What it needs to be is there if you need it, but really the first thing has got to be your lifestyle. And I think there is harm. So there's this thing called NNT, number needed to treat, and it's how many people do you need to give this drug to in order for one person to get a benefit. And there's a lot of drugs, you've got to give them to over 500 people for one person to benefit. But again, we take this population approach, which is, I'm trying to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people, so everyone's going to have this drug so that you don't get your heart attack. But I don't know if you'll benefit or if the other person will benefit. But what will happen is, of the 500 that are taking it, you know what, I'm really sorry, but 50 of you are going to have side effects, and potentially 5 of you might die from this. But we're going to give it because I don't know which one you're going to fall into. but we still need to give it to you.
It's just for the mass population, isn't it, really?
Crazy.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So you have, and these are the questions, you know, when you go to your GP, ask them, oh, can I have the NNT? And they'll be like, what? What do you want?
Do you think this will change?
No.
And is that because of the pharmaceutical industry money
Profiting.
making?
Yeah, and we need to speak, you know, louder and louder and louder. I mean, will it change? Yes, it is changing, which is why you've got people like me here championing all of it. And so it's coming. We just need it to change quicker.
There's a huge opioid crisis in America. I don't want to go too deep into the subject, but
You've watched that Netflix with...
I have, fascinating Netflix series on this. So do you guys know about the opioid crisis in
Yeah,
America?
I've seen the zombies, basically.
Well, it's led to that, but basically...
Fentanyl, isn't it? I think
yeah.
is what they're
It's
taking.
a little bit different. So there was a drug called, is it anti-coxin? Something.
Oxycodone.
Oxycodone.
We're no good at this.
All the medical terminologies.
No, but just staying on this, so in America, right, if you had an accident at work, you're in a manual job, you might have fallen off a digger, you broke your leg. You go to this doctor, they're going to prescribe you oxycodone, right? And it's got opium in it. Opium is effectively heroin, right? And then what happened after everyone got prescribed oxycodone, and these doctors were incentivized to sell oxycodone, they're prescribing it to everybody, they'd come off the prescription, they're hooked on heroin. So now you've got like a whole population, middle-class population in America who live in nice houses, are addicted to smack. They're all going to your local dealer now to get heroin. So do you think the industry will ever change if the people in charge are profiting billions from the pharmaceutical company? Do you not think there's always going to be misinformation there when there's profit involved? That's my fear.
Yeah, so to tell you the reality of what it's really like here in the UK, as a doctor, as a prescribing doctor, is there used to be what we call drug reps. So the representatives from the pharmaceutical, suppose they made, drug A, they'd come and see you in your GP surgery and tell you all about drug A. There's no money that passes hands at all. You might get a free lunch if they come and give you a talk. And then in your head is drug A. So the next time someone sees you, you're automatically thinking, I'll give them drug A. And before you know it, you've created this dependence on drug A. And then what happened is that these guidelines get built. They're called NICE guidelines, and they're the guidelines that most doctors will follow. And in there is an evaluation of drug A, drug B, and drug C. And it kind of very prescriptive as to what you should be and shouldn't be prescribing. We also have financial incentives as GPs as well, that if you prescribe X amount of X drug, then you'll get this reward. And if you don't hit that target, then you won't get that reward.
What reward would that be? Is it a cash incentive?
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that still happening today?
Yeah, it's something that we call the Quality Outcome Framework, QOF targets. So there are incentives, but these don't come from a financial perspective, they come from a health perspective. So if X amount of people are taking a drug like, say, a statin, so you've got high cholesterol, one of the treatments for having a high cholesterol is having a drug which is called a statin, something like simvastatin or atorvastatin. If you've got patients on your list that have got high cholesterol but don't have a statin prescribed, you don't get the same amount of reward as if they did. But it's coming from this belief, and it is based on information that says that statins prevent heart disease or heart attacks or death. So the incentive isn't, the thing that drives the GP is not, I've got to give this drug because I'm going to get the money. It's, I'm going to give this drug because I believe the information that says it's going to save your life. And of course I want to be rewarded for it because I need to come to work every day and serve you. So it's so convoluted. And whilst you're talking about it happening with opioids in America, it's happening with every single drug. Like, honestly, my consulting was like McDonald's drive-through. It would be like, drive in, grab your drug, drive out again. Oh, it's buy one, get one free this week. Drive back, get two, come out again. And it's like that because we had 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, I'm not going to get to your purpose and your why and what drives you and what's important to you and tell you all about food and exercise and movement. I'm going to go have this drug, and by the way, please exercise more and don't eat rubbish, and that's it.
That's crazy because in finance, I used to work in a bank, and that bank were heavily like, don't be promoting products all the time. That's not what it is. It's only if it comes up in conversation kind of thing. You shouldn't really be pushing people to get credit cards, loans, which is just bad in finance altogether, because you get a target like, this person, you got to get 10 credit cards. So you're literally convincing someone to get a credit card when they really shouldn't get one. That was bad enough. But hearing that they have targets.
So it's still, I mean, it's not as overt at that, so there is still a code amongst, the
It's just like
industry. There is
that's
a
just
code. They're not
smokescreen,
allowed to
really, isn't
advertise.
it?
They're not allowed to make false claims. You're not allowed to take, financial incentives. So there's a very, very clear code, and no one really breaks that. It's the soft stuff, like the biases that do exist. Like we said in the beginning, we make judgments really, really quickly. How do you make that choice of what you do? It's based on what someone tells you, even though it's not overt selling.
Yeah.
Did you leave the practice on a moral basis?
I did. I left because I wasn't able to be the GP, the doctor that I wanted. I wasn't helping people. They were becoming dependent on me. And I'm not the drug. I don't want to be the drug for you. I want you to have your help. And so I left on that basis.
Probably wouldn't be allowed to tell, somebody who's got high cholesterol, probably wouldn't be allowed to tell you, just, I'm not going to give you anything, but change your diet, go for more walks, go for more runs, and that's your prescription.
If you
I suppose that's what you want to do.
Yeah, but also we live in a kind of very kind of law enforcing, negligence, claims kind of world. So that fear of having a complaint, or that fear of what if something does happen to this patient and I let them go out of this room with that slightly high blood pressure or without their cholesterol tablet, and it's all going to come back at me because I didn't do what the guidelines said. So then we end up prescribing or doing the thing that might not feel quite right, but you're worried about the potential negligence if you don't, because it's going to come back at you. And so you're caught in this system and in this way of thinking. And I'm not saying sometimes it's not the right way, because there is, not all drugs are evil, and drugs do have a place, but it's what's the timeline? How long do you give someone to change their lifestyle before there is a risk? So if you came into my consulting room and had a super high blood pressure, I would have a responsibility to make sure you did not leave that consulting room with a risk of having a stroke before you got into the car.
Talking about that, so antidepressants, do they solve the problem or do they just suppress the problem?
Sticky tape. Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
They cover it up. They cover up the problem. They don't get to the root of the issue. Now, no antidepressant is going to change your life. Life is the life that you have, the circumstances that you have, the issues that you're facing. They don't just go away. Yes, what they do is they almost kind of take that edge off so that you can make more reasoned decisions. So they can help for some people to that degree. But again, if that's the thing that you think is going to change everything and you don't do the other work in terms of your own sort of therapy, reflection, changing the way that you make decisions, you're not going to get the benefit just by taking the drugs. But again, I have seen people, very, very quickly get back into the driving seat of their life because they've had some antidepressants that allowed them to do that.
I won't say any names, but I've never been on antidepressants. I'm very fortunate. My mental health is good. But people I've known who have had to take antidepressants before, the first 2 weeks of taking them, they always say it makes them 10 times worse. And then after that 2 week period, it kind of levels them out. But the way I've been explained it is they just feel numb. Like a lot of things dull out, like sex drive dulls, like desire dulls. You're right in what you're saying. It just kind of numbs you, right? Whereas you're not getting to the root of the problem. And talking about microdosing, I think there's a lot of clinical trials that have suggested that type of therapy helps you get to the root of problems because you understand what caused it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Do you see the mental health crisis getting worse in the UK than it already is?
I think it's changing. I think the fact that we're all talking about it a lot more makes a big difference. But, I get kind of really upset. It was the Mental Health Day the other day, wasn't it? And it's like, well, awareness just for today? What about the rest of the time? What are we really doing? And I don't think awareness is enough. I don't think just being more aware and having more conversations is enough. I think we have to have this toolbox of, well, what do I do when I'm lying awake worrying? What do I do when I'm in the middle of grief and need to go to work? What do I do when someone's just given me a diagnosis that I don't want? How do I allow myself to still have the drive to move and sleep well and eat when I just don't feel like it? So it's all those solutions that we need to start putting into place rather than, oh yeah, a lot of people have got anxiety, a lot of people have got depression, yeah, they need time off work, oh yeah, it's got to be deeper than that.
That's really interesting. I think another question we've all want to get, your opinion on, and I don't know who's doing it. I think we all do it, is intermittent fasting. So don't know how long for. I think probably now few months, maybe 4 months for myself. I've stopped. I'm not so strict in the evening because it's just I love tea, so I base it off tea. But so depending when I want my last cup of tea, but I try to do about 8 o'clock at night. But then I won't eat till midday, and I get up, go to the gym, train in the gym. I always feel stronger in the morning when I've not eaten. Yeah. And then I go in the sauna, the plunge pool, all of that, and I still have a good few hours without any food or my cup of tea. But we've done quite a lot of research. We've listened to a lot of podcasts. What's your opinion on it? Because there is still a bit of a mix I still hear.
So my first question back at you would be, what's your reason?
Good question. So as I got into health this year, and as I was sticking much more to I wouldn't say diet plan, but a certain calorie intake, I've never really been a huge fan of breakfast anyway. Then especially as I was going gym in the morning, I thought that, I need to have a high protein breakfast straight after gym, a big meal. And what that meant is it became quite hard for me having 3 meals a day. It became quite hard to stick to the calories that I was meant to be sticking to. And when I do intermittent fasting, also to add to that, it made me quite sluggish. I'd eat, even if it was protein, I still then takes a lot of my energy out in the morning. So now I don't eat. I kind of gain back some time by not eating and can get straight to work. I have so much more energy in the morning. Brain fog's not there. I can get tasks done much better. And also it helps me stick to my calories a lot easier because then I just have a real good lunch and a real good dinner. And I'm on, if I'm eating 1,800 calories, I can have 900 calories each meal, which is a big old lunch. And I enjoy that. I enjoy like a nice cooked lunch. Whereas if I was having 600 calories at breakfast, all of a sudden, it's a bit of a struggle. So that's my reasoning. As well as then, as I started doing research, there's a lot more benefits that.
And I think that's important. Is that why you're doing it? Are you doing it for performance, for energy, for weight loss is another common reason, or longevity, because there's a direct link with intermittent fasting and how long you live, your lifespan, your longevity, because you're actually changing, which again back to genes that you're turning on. So we've all got longevity genes as well, and when we eat determines which of those genes are switched on and which of those genes are switched off. And it's, again, super interesting. We were talking about kind of ancestors before, weren't we? And if we go back to that, that's how we used to eat. It was kind of feast and then famine. And we're kind of programmed to that, except right now, like you say, we can go down the road and grab what we want. There's food abundantly all around us. But what you're then not doing is putting your body into kind of survival mode. So we talked a bit about stress, and why I like stress and love stress is because you've got to put your body under this level of stress called hormetic stress in order to activate all your survival mechanisms. So if you want to stay alive a long time and want to have a long life, then you've got to put your body into survival mode so that it will switch on all of that. And that's what intermittent fasting does, is it switches on your longevity genes.
The only thing that got my mind thinking a little bit of recent is to do with that increases your chance of getting a stomach ulcer and stuff like that. Is that true?
I would love to see where you read that and heard that. And what
I can't remember where I heard that, but then I did think. So my dad had a stomach ulcer before, but then what I did think is there's a difference between not eating for a long period of time, but you're not in a fasted state. So if you eat, half an apple this morning, and then you don't eat for 10 hours, I'm guessing that's probably not great. Whereas if you don't eat at all and you don't have your tea and stuff, then obviously you're in the, what's the 2 states? The
ketosis. Is it
rest
ketosis?
And digest.
Yeah, so obviously as soon as you break your fast, you may as well just eat, basically.
Yeah.
And now not getting the benefits.
Kind of, again, when you look at digestion and what's going on, if you're not switching on any of your digestive processes, because really what you're doing is extending your fasting from when you sleep, and you're extending it the other way before you go to bed. That's the easiest way to do it, is if your digestive processes are completely switched off, then you're not really risking anything in relation to your digestion. Your acid is not going to sit there in your stomach going, oh, I've got no food to eat, so I'll just corrode the lining of myself and eat myself. It's not going to do that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The answer would be that maybe if you did eat something very small, but then you didn't eat for the rest of the day, so you have switched that on, then it could cause problems.
Obviously, we know some of the benefits of fasting, but maybe for the listeners, what would you say the main benefits
and also for the
fasting?
listeners, could you break down just on that as well what intermittent fasting actually is for anyone that might not know?
Right. Yeah. So again, it's kind of in the language and the terminology. So fasting is something that we do purposefully. So different to starvation as well, because starvation is you're not starving yourself. It's you're purposefully choosing a time window in which you eat. So I like to use the word, you've probably heard of it's called intermittent fasting, or it's called time-restricted eating, or time-restricted feeding. I like to use the words time-connected eating.
Time-connected eating.
Time-connected eating. Again, back to giving it a positive vibe. You're not kind of denying yourself anything. You're not necessarily trying to prevent anything. You're just connecting when you eat with time, which is exactly what you're doing. So with time-connected eating, you're making a decision to eat within a certain window, and that might be a 12-hour window, a 10-hour window, an 8-hour window. So to anyone listening who's not done this before, just start with a 12-hour window. So just start eating a little bit later than you might do normally for breakfast, and have your dinner a little bit earlier than you might. Because if you are sleeping for that magic 8 hours, then all you need to do is extend a little bit on either side, and it becomes easier. And the thing to do is think about how amazing your liver is. So your liver goes through a process called gluconeogenesis, so it's making glucose. I think we said earlier, glucose is one of the kind of primary fuels for your body. You mentioned ketones, and your brain can kind of function on those as well. But there's certain cells that absolutely 100% only can survive on glucose. So we need to allow our liver to make that. And the more you allow this time-connected eating to become part of your pattern, the more your liver knows when food's coming and when isn't, and then it will pour out the right amount of glucose at the right time from your stores, because we store it as well. And then the benefits, I think you've summarized them beautifully in terms of energy, clarity, focus, productivity, longevity, and then all of that, of course, is then leading to what we talked about earlier, which is reducing inflammation. So then prevention, you're not then triggering inflammaging, which then triggers diseases. So it's all beautifully.
And just to clarify that when you say there's the window, obviously you can't, I know there's certain things they say if you tested, but you can't have anything. So it's only water. So like even if you had a handful of blueberries sort of thing, you've broken your fast, and then it's...
You allow black coffee though. I heard that you're allowed black
apparently
coffee,
with some
right?
people you can't, depending on each individual, like you say, going back is...
testing.
Yeah,
but,
testing.
But if you eat food or anything that's going to kick you out of the fast...
The thing to think about is this thing that I want to put in my mouth right now going to trigger my digestive processes? So if it's got anything like carbohydrates, proteins and fats in it, yes, it will. So berries, carbohydrate and fibre, yes, it's going to trigger digestion. Biting into an apple, yeah, it's going to trigger digestion. So those are all no-nos. Coffee, what's coffee? Coloured water? Flavoured water? Is it triggering digestion? Am I going to need to digest? You're not really. So in theory, again, flavoured teas, caffeine-flavoured water, coffee is okay if you're not adding milk to it or adding sugar to it. So when I say it's okay, again, back to the goal, if you want to trigger your longevity pathways and live longer, which is what I'm all about, then having flavoured water, coloured water is not going to trigger that. So that's going to be fine for that. If you want to do it for performance, then or sleeping better or more energy, the caffeine might knock that out because it's not allowing yourself to do the reset. So I think you've got to get back to why are you eating in this time-connected way.
So do you think anyone who wants to live longer should intermittent fast?
Yes.
And how long is the sweet spot?
The sweet spot is 8 hours.
So eat for 8
8 hour
hours.
eating window.
So
An
like
8 hour
12 to
eating,
8.
an 8 hour eating
So you
window.
eat food in 8 hours,
Food
basically.
in 8 hours. And, a 10, 12-hour window is going to get you there. So this is not to put people off as I can't possibly do in 8 hours. The closer you get, the stronger you get. What does an 8-hour eating window look like? Pretty much like what you
Well,
described.
I do 12 to 8.
I do a 12 to 8. And again, it depends what you're like. Like, you know, I was being a little forager, a mouse in the night. I love kind of eating late into the night.
Sam's eating chocolate bars, mate.
Sam would wake up at 3 a.m. and eat a chocolate
If
bar.
I told you the story, you'd be so
Eating
angry because it's like the complete opposite of what health should be.
Okay.
What about if you reduce that 8 hours, does that bring more benefits or?
No, so I again, looking at kind of the research and the data, it's back to kind of, you know, more isn't better. You don't have to go even more tight on this at all. But people, what the most important thing is the consistency. Is making this part of your lifestyle. You don't want this to be something that you have to do and it's on a tick list. It just becomes like, it sounds like it's become with you. This is just the way
normal.
I roll. This is just like,
It's better. Like I don't. Sometimes, but then if I want a cup of tea at 9 o'clock, I'll have one, and I'm not too.
And I always go with
strict.
that kind of flip flop as well. Listen, life is not meant to be lived in kind of, you know, solid lines. You do need flexibility and agility with it. And if for kind of a couple of days or a day or a week away and you don't do what you're used to doing, listen, we're very adaptive. We're going to get back to it. You're not going to do yourself any harm at all.
So a question around another thing we've researched is on occasions doing extended fasts. So like maybe once a quarter. I mean, I hear people doing up to even 3 days or 48 hours. And there's additional benefits to doing that every so often. Is that true? And have you done that? What's the longest you fasted for?
The longest I fasted, so back to kind of when I was a kid, this is kind of a cultural thing, but fasting is in a lot of cultures. Most cultures have got fasting kind of ingrained into them. And one of the fasts that I remember doing kind of when I was 16, 17-year-old was a sort of 5-day fast. But the purpose behind it, back to why did you fast, was so that you'd get a good husband. So
No way.
Yeah, it's like, you know, if you do this fast, it's for 5 days, it's in this month, this is how you're going to get a good husband. So religious.
But as soon as you finish, they got date nights on, innit? Like, I'll be selling date nights, like some kind of something.
That's crazy. So how was that? How is doing it for 5 days?
Yeah, again, back to, you know, trust your body, know what it needs. I mean, you're still drinking water and all the rest of it. But again, quite easy because I had a kind of strong drive to do it. Right?
Did it work?
Just make sure he's
one of my friends, he's saying he was trying to do it for 7 days, but he couldn't get past. Like just drinking water for 7 days. But he got to day 3 or 4 and just said it's too hard.
And there will be. You're going to have those, you know, points where you're going, right, you know, this is, but it's a bit like kind of surfing the wave. You kind of, those cravings stop. You've got to just get past the cravings.
What does it do fasting for that long though? Like 3 days, 4 days, a week? Like what does that actually do?
So again, in terms of sort of activating repair, that's the biggest thing. It's allowing your body to repair, allowing the lining of your gut to repair. You know, if you've got a leaky gut, it's going to repair that. It's allowing all of your DNA to repair. There's a lot that's going on kind of more metabolically with that.
Do you produce stem cells as well?
Do you
your own? Yeah, apparently that's what I read.
So you're producing more mitochondria. So mitochondria are your kind of energy battery packs in your cells. So you produce those. Do you produce more stem cells? That is an interesting question. I don't know.
I have. That's what I have read. Yeah, that you start to produce
and I guess
more.
it's then, you know, how useful are those stem cells to you? 'Cause stem cells are super important in terms of
massive. Yeah.
I'll have to look into that. I don't know the exact answer to that.
Yeah.
Come back to that.
So would you recommend, once you've got to like where we are, where it's consistently 8 hours a day, would you recommend, and if so, how far apart, doing a slightly longer 48 hours or 3 day fast? Should we be aiming to build up to that?
Yeah, have a go with it. And I think, again, you know, think about even a 24-hour. Start with a 24-hour water fast.
I've done that a couple of times on the weekend now,
Yeah.
Or like 21 hours or something I've managed.
Yeah.
And then it's just got to time where it's like evening time.
And this time do it with a glucose monitor on, because, again, what you want to avoid is in that fasting state is to be underperforming from a sugar perspective. If you're getting hypos and you're not actually fueling your brain because your liver isn't making the glucose that it needs, you don't need to be eating it, your liver will make what you need, then you know that that's probably not the right thing for you huge deal.
Right.
On the fasting, sorry, Jack.
I'm just going to give one piece of advice to the
feel like,
listeners on this is if you're doing the long fast, do not make the mistake that I made when I did the first 24-hour one, which I thought, great, one meal, I ordered a Turkish, and I just indulged straight away, and oh my gosh, I had the worst stomach cramps. Literally after 10 minutes, the worst stomach cramps ever, because I didn't realise you have to slowly break the fast. Eat something little and then don't just go and stuff your face, because I'm telling you, it's a bad mistake. For about an hour, I was literally cramping over.
Yeah,
So
that's crazy.
There's a good piece of
What
advice.
does that remind you of, Luke? Our sales guy decided to do like a 24-hour fast.
Right.
And he didn't come in work for like 3 days because he said he was ill.
Okay.
It could be true.
Yeah.
Jack, if you're listening, mate, disciplinary on Monday. One last question about the fasting.
Yeah,
I know we've been on this for a while and I'm conscious of time. I know we have to move on. A lot of people listening will be gym guys. They'll want to be putting on muscle. And historically, you're told, again, there's a lot of misinformation, but eat 2 hours a day. Every 2 hours, eat 4 to 6 meals a day. Can you still put on muscle, mass, and fast at the same time? Or is this not really for that type of individual?
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say test. So the AHEA is anabolism, which really is anabolism, catabolism, metabolism. So one of the tests that I do looks at all of your proteins, so all of your amino acids, every single one of them. And it's really interesting you bringing up kind of the gym guys, because it's exactly the people are taking those protein shakes and having those protein bars that don't have all the protein that they need. And that's two things. One is you've got a higher need because of the way that you're working out, and two, not all protein shakes are created equal. How does fasting affect that? Well, so long as the timing there doesn't matter. It's going to be the quantity and the volume. So back to what you were saying about, being able to have 2 bigger meals. It's what then is going into those meals that's important. So it's when you eat and what you're eating. Can you make the same gains intermittent fasting? Yes.
I was told from my personal trainer, because I was trying to implement both at the same time, but I train in the mornings, and he said you have to have protein around the time that you're training to kind of maximize the muscle stretch or the muscle break. So that would just break the fast completely. So back to what you were saying about the timing, how important is the timing?
So although I've talked about, we've talked about kind of a 12 to 8, for you, back to what's your reason for doing the intermittent fasting, and how does that fit with your life? So actually at the moment, training is important to me. I'm making gains, and my routine is morning training.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is have my time-connected eating hours based around that. So I'm going to eat from 8 a.m. or as soon as I wake up, I'm going to count my 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours forward, and I'm going to stop eating at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
So you shift it the other way, because you're going to you've got a more immediate protein need. So you might want to just shift it, but it doesn't matter when you start, so long as it's consecutive.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
Definitely.
Perfect.
Back to the 5. I feel like
we're nearly there, right?
We're on 4. We're on 4.
Age done, hormones done, ecosystem
That's it,
done, anabolism, metabolism, catabolism done. We're back now full circle to DNA, which is where we
genetics, right?
Genetics, yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about the genetic side of things when it comes to health, in terms of, are people getting ill because that's just their genetic build-up and they're destined to be ill, or is it not genetics? Is it more lifestyle?
Yeah, okay. I think that's really important to unplug, isn't it? Because when it comes to your genes, there's this sense that you're born with what you're born with. So yes, we all do have our genes. And in terms of how that connects to your health and illness and disease, about 40% of what happens to you is contributed to by your genes. 60% you can then influence by your lifestyle, because above all of your genes sit what's called your epigenetic makeup, so your epigenes. And your epigenes really are they're like a light switch. So they're telling you, are you turning this gene on and it's going to express itself, or are you turning this gene off and it's not going to express itself? So you will have genes, but it doesn't mean, when you have a genetic test, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all pumping out and active. So your lifestyle, your epigenetic, your layer above it will determine what you're switching on and what you're switching off. But the really useful thing, like why I do the DNA testing, is that you can also use your genetic makeup to your advantage. So if I give you an example of that, I ran the London Marathon last year. And whilst I was running it, the one thing that kept me going was me being able to say to myself, I'm genetically made to do this. I can do this. I can do this. And the reason I knew this is because I'd had a genetic test done, which told me that I carried the genes for endurance, compared to having less of the gene for the results from weight training present. So I had a stronger endurance gene than I did a stronger training gene.
So you can see all of this by testing.
Exactly. So
That's
then
incredible.
when you're hitting like your brick wall and you know that you're genetically made for this, guess what? You're going to keep going.
How many of those boxes are there? Because you've covered quite a lot that you can tell by this DNA testing. But how many boxes are actually there?
Oh, there's lots of things that you can tell. You can look at your stress response. You can look at things like weight, obesity genes. There's kind of memory genes.
You said you're a morning person, a night person.
Morning, night person.
So how many in total?
Oh God, I can't even tell you. There's
loads.
Yeah, there's lots. Again, back to kind of commercial tests. Some of this you can get off the shelf. Wouldn't recommend doing it because you don't know what you're getting kind of as a result and what you're going to do with that information as well. But things like you can look at, how do you metabolize alcohol? We've said, how do you metabolize broccoli? What do you like with cheese? What do you like with things like celiac? And then you can look at specific diseases as well. So there's a whole range of things. And I know, it can be a bit scary. Like, let's be honest, it can be a little bit like, I know people listen and be like, I don't really want to know all of this. Like, sometimes you want to be the ostrich with the head in the sand going, I'm all right, look at me, I'm healthy, I'm all right. But I would really strongly urge people to test, because once you know, you're in control, right? My whole thing is like, be in control of your own health, take charge, take ownership, take responsibility, and you can only know that by getting to know yourself.
So overall, what's the main tests they need to do, and how much are those tests?
Take us through your programs. Yeah.
Take you through the program. So my main focus is on longevity, living your longest life possible. And I have a very strong belief that we can all live a 1 million hour life.
What does that mean?
A million hour life.
A million
Who's good at
hour
maths?
life.
Can I guess how many years that is?
Go on.
I'm going to say 85 years.
Yeah, I'm going to say 84.
That's just not even working out the maths, really. You're just going by.
Yeah, just going by what I think. Yeah.
Okay. It is. Shall I tell you?
Yeah.
114 years.
Oh, wow.
Is it?
I was going to, in my head, it went to 111 or 110 because of, the first thing came to mind is it takes you 11 years to become a millionaire if you earned like £1.
He's in there with the money.
Good maths.
He's in there. So yeah, a millionaire with a 1 million hour life. How is that for that goal, for being your goal? Right? That's amazing. And we can listen. There's humans that have lived that life. So the fact that there is a human who has done that already means that it's possible.
Yeah, and just on that,
That's so cool.
there's a lot of people in Japan that live the longest lives. There's a Netflix documentary about it. It shows you that diet.
Centurions.
Right? Is that the purple potatoes?
Not quite. Centenarians.
Mate, we're fucked. don't quote anything in it.
Are they the purple potatoes?
Yeah.
Yeah, they eat loads of these purple potatoes and they just live until like 120.
Okay. All right, let's just break this down a little bit. So there are areas in the world which have been called the blue zones, which have been found to house the longest living centenarians. So people who live over 100. And there's 5 of these zones. And last year I went to one in Costa Rica.
Very cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which was amazing. And I met a man who was 106 years old. And not only did I meet him, but I met all the generations that came after him, so down to his kind of 7-year-old granddaughter. So, we've got these generations existing now. And I spent a day with them, and I looked at what they were doing. And it wasn't all about the purple potatoes. But yeah, it's what were they eating? A lot of it was stuff that they were growing. A lot of it was stuff that their neighbours were growing, like fresh stuff that's coming out of good soil. What did they do? They spent a lot of time outdoors. Right, I was there. They were on their farms milking the cow. There wasn't a gym. when they were milking the cows, and you know the amount of biceps work to do that, it was amazing. Climbing trees to get this like single amazing fruit from the top of the tree. And look, I know we're living in urban environments and we're not, you know, living on farms, but what can you do in your day to day that kind of mimics that?
Can we stay on that a sec? So you mentioned something about natural food off the land. I think a big problem is when you buy vegetables in the UK or the Western world, it's healthy, it's broccoli, it's potatoes, whatever. But what a lot of people don't realise is actually GMO, which is genetically modified. What does the O stand for? Genetically modified something,
That's
right?
it.
So
that's it. I think that's it.
Right, okay.
It's the modified, I think.
Yeah. So, like, for example, these genetically modified fruits and vegetables they make up the majority of the healthy market. When you go into a normal supermarket, are they dangerous? Would you advise just going organic for a healthy life? Should you stay away from genetically modified food? Because even the bananas that we eat, they're not real bananas. They're genetically modified.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So how do you...
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. You know, the soil isn't what it should be, right? So even like just aside from that, even a kind of a broccoli that's not GMO doesn't have all the nutrients it needs in it because the soil is very, very depleted. So you're not always getting the best that you can from your food. But look, we've got to go with what we've got because we're not the agriculturists that are growing the food, right? So a couple of things there. One that's really interesting is, again, back to testing, because I always come back to this. And I mentioned arsenic right at the beginning about one of my clients, didn't I? Was that, where's that come from? And a lot of it can either be water source, but also soil source. So think about where your food is coming from. You're not always going to know what's in the soil that's grown. And when you test and you find that you've got a toxin on board that you don't know where it's from, think about it. What are the choices I've got now? Going organic is a choice. It can be an expensive choice.
That's what
It's also hard to find.
Yes, exactly.
It's not everywhere, is it?
Yeah, no,
my mum was actually saying this yesterday. To double the price, she's having to look at Ocado or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So and those are important things. So what I always say is think about what are the big five. I always come back to the big five because I've been on so far and seen the big five. I love the big five. But what are the big five things that you eat most regularly? So if it is, potatoes and broccoli and carrots and whatever, make those organic. Don't worry too much about everything else.
Yeah.
So if you zone in on your common thing and choose those to be organic, make the bananas organic, make the potatoes organic, 2 or 3 other things, and those are the organic things and everything else isn't, then you're on the right road to the common things that are then going to have a much more positive effect
of course. Would you say for the listeners that it's actually better to have your 5 a day if it is GMO, which is genetically modified, than to not have your 5 a day at all?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question.
Sorry, I know we're asking you some crazy questions.
It's really that split of a decision, as in they're that bad that...
Yeah, I think you just go for have your 5 days.
Yeah.
Get it in no matter what. That's what I thought.
Well, first of all, I'd go 10 a day. Right, 5 a day is not enough. It's back to the reason we have the 5 a day is the population thing and the government going, what's the minimum thing that people are most going to do? Like if we tell them to do 10 a day, no one's going to do it. So what's the smallest thing that they will do? Okay, people will do 5 a day. But 5 a day, when I look at kind of, I'm fine, normal to I'm optimized, it doesn't cut it. So you've got to have more. You need as much, back to gut health, you've got to have as much diversity and as much color as possible in your gut. And I agree. Get the color in, get the diversity in, then think about the organic.
Yeah. I think it's so crazy. Most people don't even know about this, right? They don't know that the food they eat, which is branded as healthy, is made in a lab. It's genetically modified. It doesn't grow. It's crazy to me.
And even with the sort of vegetarian vegan movement, I think we have to be very careful there as well because just because it says vegan doesn't mean it's any more healthy. And
or
I'm all up
harmful
for
the environment.
Say that again.
So like a lot of the vegans with these options don't realise that, where this stuff's coming from is also very bad for the environment that they're claiming to protect. Do you get what I mean?
Yes, it can. And then there's maths around that and, carbon footprints and all of that. And again, I don't want to get into diet wars because I don't think we need to. I just think we need to think about, again, you as the individual and how is the food you are eating affecting you. It's, again, looking at source. Where's your food coming from? And we don't spend enough time doing that. What's on the back of the packets that you've got? We don't spend enough doing that. Fake meats, are they worse than having real meat? The processed stuff is in the fake meats. Really want to try and avoid that as much as possible.
When you say test all of this, sort of stuff around the food. I know you're talking about how it spikes your blood sugar levels and stuff, but in terms of testing whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's got toxins in, how are you doing that, and how can someone test that? What do you need to?
So my way of working, so I've got a couple of ways. I usually like to work with people for a whole year, particularly entrepreneurs, business owners, people who've got that sight on kind of making an impact, because you've got to be at a peak level of health for a long time. And this isn't about go and have 3 tests and everything will be fine. It's about what do you need. So what I tend to do is really unpack it. And that big 5 that I've said, I mean, they're absolutely core. Those will be in my 1-year program. You see me kind of wearing some of these devices. This is a blood pressure machine on my wrist. This is the sleep data ring that I've got. I've got a sugar monitor. Those are things that I will send you. But we don't do everything at once, because you mentioned there's so much you could do and you get overwhelmed. You're not going to do any of it. So we layer this. So all those kind of 5 tests, age, hormones, ecosystem, anabolism, and DNA will do. All the devices will use. And that's kind of over a year to do. But appreciably, some people also don't want to or aren't ready to invest in themselves to that level. Although I think it's, we all agree here, it's got to be the priority. And so I also have what I call a 10 years younger program, which is, what is the creme here? What are the things that I would not want anyone to not do? So I test your age, and I test your metabolism, I give you a sugar sensor, and in 10 weeks, you become 10 years younger. That's what we're aiming for, is how we're going to reverse aging, add longevity, improve your health span. What are the key things? And those I think are the most important is stress, sleep, and sugar are the 3 things to zone in on.
That's great. Just to answer kind of just a bit of clarification on what I was also asking is specifically around like the toxins in food and knowing I'm nervous to say the words now because I'm going to get them all wrong, but is it plasticides and peptides are the things they spray with, or what?
Plasticides, that's a new one.
I don't know all the lingo, but along those lines, how do you specifically test what's going on there in your body, whether these fruits are actually, to what extent are they bad for you? What toxins are in them?
So I send, again, a home testing kit to you. So wherever you are, this is stuff I want you to, take charge, be responsible. The tests I do a urine test. So you'd collect your urine first thing in the morning, freeze that, get that returned back to these
freezer.
Put it in my freezer. Yeah, you got to freeze it. And send that back to the lab. A couple of weeks later, we've got at least 15 different toxins that I'm looking at, from platinum to nickel to tin to iron to arsenic to a whole load of things. And some of this stuff, I mean, interestingly, like people who vape, for example, we talked about that.
That's me. Joe's always at me for this.
I'm at him. I've been telling him to stop.
Why did I just automatically get people who vape? And
he did actually look us out.
Strange, isn't it?
People who vape.
You saw it, didn't you?
So on that, the UK's gone, I think the world, I don't know, but the UK specifically has gone crazy on vapes.
It's gone nuts,
everyone is a crackhead on vapes.
Start from kids as well, from 12 years old.
At school.
Because you've got bubblegum flavour vape.
Yeah.
Like,
They taste amazing.
So
And you can do them anywhere, right? Lying in bed, fine in the morning is,
so good.
That is a crackhead. Fix him.
Please cure me.
But what's happened?
Brutal.
You know what? But what's happened? We've replaced one awful addiction, which is cigarettes and smoking, and it's taken us half a century to understand how harmful it is. And we've gone, do you know what? Don't worry about that. We'll just replace it with something else equally harmful, but we'll just hide that, and we'll allow ourselves another 50 years to figure out how it's harming you. You got to wake up and smell the roses. Honestly, it's.
Do you think they're changing smoking age group, aren't they? So it's going to be illegal smoke from 19, then the year after 20, then 21. But they know they're just going to tax the vapes, right?
Yeah. But what's the? I know obviously there isn't the long-term data, but what kind of impacts do you think these vapes are having on people's health?
Well, if you think about it, you're exposing yourself. I did an article in the Metro about this. There's over 1,000 chemicals that you're exposing yourself to through vaping.
Really?
And you don't know what effect those are having on your body. We don't know. Like we said, we haven't got enough research around it. But ask yourself this. Do I purposefully want to put some metal device in my mouth, inhale it in, and give myself 1,000 chemicals that I don't know really what they're doing?
So would you say that it's less harmful than smoking? For someone that's trying to stop smoking, get on the vape, eventually stop the vaping, do you think that's a good path, or do you think no?
Back to what you've said, like, pick the goal. Start with the end goal in mind. If your end goal is I will stop smoking and not vape, great. But most people don't do that. They'll be, I'll stop smoking cigarettes, but I'm going to vape instead.
100%. The biggest problem was I started vaping to stop fags. I only smoked about 4 or 5 fags a day. And now I'm buying, they're called elf bars, right? I buy 1 elf bar a day, every single day, which is about £5.99.
The equivalent's like 20 fags in there.
Apparently,
And elf will say they're fine.
Yeah.
Right?
They're made in China, you know. It can't
Oh,
be
so
good
they're
for you.
fine then.
Yeah, and I bet you can't buy them in China. They just ship them here.
Yeah. So do you think there's going to be a lot to unravel, which is bad stuff in terms of people who have been vaping for a long time? Do you think there's going to be like a craze
I'm going
about
to bounce
this?
this back to you. Like, what's it going to take for you to stop vaping? Because, like, I don't think I need to even do the tests for you to know. I can show you that you've got tin and nickel and are being poisoned by it. Are you going to stop?
No.
Do you know what? It's one of those ones, like, yeah, I want to, but I also really enjoy, I do enjoy vaping, and I've stopped a lot of other things in my life, right? I don't drink as much anymore. I don't go out raving. I've stopped a lot of bad, toxic
I tell you what
habits.
you're looking for.
It's like my release. Do you get what I mean? It's that one
the
thing.
The thing you're craving is dopamine.
Right.
That's what you want. Ultimately, whatever way you're getting it, you want that dopamine hit. You want
So
that
true.
feel-good hit.
We were
That's
all
so
the same,
true.
really.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge to stop these bad habits.
Of course.
But your body doesn't know how it's getting the dopamine hit. All it knows is it's getting the dopamine. So you've got to find another way to give it the same dopamine. Like, it doesn't know where it's coming from. It just is.
What are healthy ways of producing dopamine?
What are healthy ways of I think you need to figure out what your own feel good is. It's going to be really different for different people. Like, I'll get a buzz by, like, bouncing up and down on a trampoline for 10 minutes. Or I'll get a buzz by giving someone an amazing hug. Or I'll get a buzz by standing on a stage and speaking out, right? You've got to know what is it that gives you that, oh, this is it. And this is where I feel at my best.
That's a good answer. Sorry to go back to it, but just I'm finding this fascinating. So a lot
Have
of
you
people.
got time, by the way? Because obviously we're...
good.
No, I know
You
it's,
sure?
it's 2 hours. I know it's,
Yeah.
I know it's been for a while.
Anyway,
but a lot of the listeners, the majority of the listeners will be vapors. All you got to do is just go outside and go to a pub. Like, you don't have to go outside for a fag anymore. You make sure the bartender's not looking, a couple cheeky pulls. You can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
So how important do you think it is for people to stop this? Because a lot of people, not everybody, is doing it and are very addicted. I am so addicted to this stuff. It's the first thing, I'm not even joking, it's the first thing I do in the morning. Before I even drink my water, I'll wake up on my vape somewhere in my bed, I'll find it, 10 puffs before I can do anything. And I'm telling you this because I think a lot of people are the same, a lot of people are the same.
And I totally get it. It's because it's cool, it's trendy, it's accessible, it smells good, it tastes good, you get that immediate... Right? You've got to go cold turkey, I think. You do. There isn't going to be a kind of, I'll just do 5 puffs instead of 10.
Yeah.
Right? This means something to me. My health means something to me. Living my best life means something to me. Until you get to that, you're not going to stop. And
Of
when you
course.
decide that your life matters, does it matter? Who does it matter to? Have you ever been, like, at a point in your life where it was kind of close to the edge,
What, in terms of...
like
what,
close to dying or close to feeling like...
Oh, have
oh,
I
it's over?
nearly?
Yeah.
Fortunately, no, I haven't been in that situation before. No.
That's the prevention and cure again, isn't it?
You're coming back to that. It's really recognizing how fragile life is,
Yeah.
right? And if you can really feel that, it doesn't have to be your own experience. Like, maybe it's someone close to you or a story that you've heard, but you've got to connect with that, and then you'll do what it takes. And if all it takes, and I say all it takes is going cold turkey and feeling shit for 2 weeks out of a 1,000,000-hour life, feeling crap for 48 hours or a bit longer, you're going to do it, aren't you?
For sure. I think a lot of people listening to this will think, okay, cool, it's time to stop vaping, right?
All you're doing, honestly, is lining the pockets of some industry who does not care at all about your health, about your life. Doesn't give a shit.
Just knocking hours off your life.
Do you know what? As true as that is, I know as soon as this podcast is finished, one of the first things I'm going to do is probably have a ball in my face. But no, what you said,
Yeah,
I
2 hours as
completely
well.
agree, though. I don't want to dismiss it. I think there's huge value in what you're saying, and it's true, you know.
So how are we going to do it? How do you make it the thing? Because if there was one thing you did for yourself, for your health, well, there's two things I'd probably say for you from what I've heard today is one, the vaping, and two, the sleeping.
Yeah.
And you know that. You didn't need me to come in and talk to you for over 2 hours, right? You've known that. You know that. But honestly, today has to be the day that makes the difference.
That's one question about sleeping. I was going to ask it as a quick fire kind of question at the end. So we talked about 8 hours, but haven't really necessarily talked about how to get quality sleep and what to do before going to sleep, like those last couple of hours to make sure that we can sleep, get a better quality of sleep.
Yeah. No, good point. So number one, fix your bedtime, right? 10 p.m. is the time that I'm going to bed every night. That's it. 2 hours before that, that's your time to kind of wind down. That's it. I'm not going to have my laptop open, or I'm not going to be, binging on Netflix. I'm not going to be doing anything. If you're serious about sorting out your sleep. Also, light, I keep coming back to that. Have you ever worn those kind of blue blocker lights, glasses at all? Right, so do that, because light makes a big difference to how you're going to actually get into bed. What you want to happen is you want to get into bed, and within 5 to 15 minutes, you want to be able to have fallen asleep. Then you want to stay asleep, get into deep sleep, have some light sleep, have some dream sleep, and wake up feeling like you've had a good night. That's what you want to happen. But the preparation for that doesn't happen just before you go to bed. It actually happens when you wake up, where we were talking about get out into the sunlight first thing in the morning. That's what you need to do. The intermittent fasting is going to make a big difference, the time-connected eating. Really then think about what does then your evening need to look like. Right, you've got to have a wind-down time. Like, I don't know, none of you got babies, have you? But when you have babies, you don't just go from woohoo, hey, yeah, and then go to sleep. You have to, and they're never going to go to sleep. They're wired, right? You've got to unwire. So what do you need to do in that time? If you need to work for a bit, fine. Put your blue blocker glasses on. I mean, we all look like cyborgs in my house in the evening, but they do the job, right? They're going to allow your melatonin to kick in and go, oh yeah, this is the difference between day and night, and now I can kick in, and you're going to start feeling that sleep pressure and that natural pressure to sleep. A couple of things keep us awake and stop us sleeping. One is worry and anxiety and things about, what have I got to do and what am I going to do tomorrow, and all the decision making. Have a time earlier in the evening, like you say, make it a mindful time or a meditative time or a time to journal, when you just allow yourself to pour out all those things. And if there is something very specific that you're worrying about, solve the worry before you go to bed. And I don't mean solve the whole issue. If you're thinking about, what am I going to put in that proposal for tomorrow? Well, in your mind, write out the first 3 lines, so that if later on you're thinking about it, when it's, I don't need to think about it, I've already solved it. Breathing, breathwork before you go to sleep can make a big difference as well. Again, what you're doing is switching off your activated sympathetic nervous system. You're getting into your kind of parasympathetic, slower. Don't eat at least 2 hours before you go to bed. So you need that window when all your digestive systems can just have been finished. Even a tiny little, last minute foraging mouse piece of chocolate triggers off everything again. So then you spend the next 2 hours, 3 hours digesting, and you don't want to do that. Journaling, I mentioned as well. The other thing is listening to alpha wave music. So if you're someone who does struggle to fall asleep and you find it's taking you a long time to fall asleep, alpha waves are the waves that you drop into just before you get into deep sleep. So if you listen to alpha wave music, it's got a sort of frequency of 8 to 13 hertz. You can find it on Spotify and everywhere. Listen to that, and that will automatically mean that you kind of drift into sleep much, much easier. So, yeah, quite a few things there.
Yeah, just give it 10 there. Decent things. Even if you can do a couple of them, I guess that's progress, right?
Amazing. How can people find you online?
Find me, my website, dralkapatel.com. My socials, Dr Alka Patel UK. Those are probably going to be the quickest. You're welcome. Send me a DM, send me a message through the website. Once you've got my email, you'll also get my WhatsApp business number, so you can ping me on WhatsApp as well.
Amazing.
Two final questions I've been asking the guests. First one, out of maybe books, podcasts, people you follow on social media, is there anyone you'd tell people to follow or listen to, something that's helped you on your sort of journey or mindset?
So I kind of like to look at things from a kind of science, neurology, biology perspective. One of the podcasts I always listen to is Huberman Lab. So they're great for just kind of getting into the why and into the science of things. Because I do think, knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you're likely to take action on it without feeling overwhelmed by it. But knowledge on its own is not going to be enough. Listening to a podcast in your ears is not going to cut it, but it gives you a really good starting point.
And then the last question, a little bit different, is if you could choose 4 people around the dinner table, who would that be? Past or present?
Here we go. That's it.
Multipliers.
Let's eat, but not after 8 o'clock.
Yeah. No, well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
It was
really
by far
insightful
the longest episode we've done, but
That is
it's
the longest episode we've ever
really,
done.
really, really good.
Yeah, thank you.
So